Well, this has been something that has actually been a sort of bucket list item for me ever since like 2005, 2006, seeing you try out for Idol. And we're roughly the same age, and I was going through like, how am I going to support my family, and how am I going to do what I do, and then there's you with just this story that was so incredibly inspiring, and then to see you go as far as you did there, and lose, and then have an incredible career after that. For me, it continues to be this ongoing inspiration for me in what I'm doing now.
Thank you so much, man.
And so I am just thrilled to be able to talk with you, and thank you for being willing to share your story. And
absolutely, man, absolutely, and thank you for having me. I've been enjoying your videos on the road, and I just kind of found you one day. I don't even know how I stumbled across it. Analysis of it was somebody I love, and I can't remember who it was now, but I was like, ooh, well, I kind of got hooked.
Yeah, cool. And another thing that has inspired me about your journey is that you don't ever seem to stop changing, pushing, evolving. Some of my favorite artists that I grew up with, when a new album came out, the minute you listen to the new album, you go, oh, that's different. And then you listen to it a couple more times and you're like, and I get why it's different and I love it.
Yeah.
And I have felt that way about every album you've put out.
Oh, thank you, man.
And particularly with the latest one, Dearly Beloved, there are so many things in there that both point backward and show your evolution and growth as a songwriter and vocalist. And I mean, even you going out, you're still watching videos on like how to sing better or, vocal analysis of this and that. Like, you are not done learning. And you've mentioned before that, you've done a lot of interviews, right? You've been everywhere, Kelly Clarkson's show, all that stuff, but you've never had the chance to talk about the craft, talk about your evolution as a vocalist, what you've learned, how you've gotten where you've gotten. So I'd love to just start at the very beginning. And so my first question for you is, when did you first figure out you could sing? When did that confidence thing, not when did you first figure out when you wanted to sing for a career or whatever,
right.
When did you find the very beginnings of your voice?
I was thinking about that recently, and because it was way before I ever thought that was even something that I would want to do. Okay. I remember being a young kid, just always being drawn to singers on the radio. I was always kind of a sucker for a good pop melody, but I was always interested in how the voice sounded. And at the time, I wasn't thinking any of that. But in hindsight, I was always drawn to singers, and singers who could sing well, right. That had a character and I would always find myself trying to emulate that. I remember doing Rick Astley impersonations when I was a kid, and my cousin would always ask me, "Dude, we're no strangers to love," and I remember just always kind of thinking that that's just what everybody can do. Like I would find myself doing, imitating like Looney Tunes voices and stuff like that. Which, by the way, Mel Blanc was. I still listen to some of that work and go, how the hell was he doing that? And none of them sound alike, and they're so distinctive. And I would try to emulate people that I looked up to, but I didn't look at it as like I'm trying to do this better so I can, do this one day. I wanted to be a comic book artist. I wanted to be anything but a singer. I wanted to be the next Jean-Claude Van Damme,
Yeah.
And I was always obsessed with like comic books, and right around the teenage years, before that, I was obsessed with Boys to Men. So I would be mowing my lawn outside with my Walkman.
Yep.
And because I would never do this in front of anyone, but if it felt like a safe place and it was loud enough where I could get away with it, I had the freedom and the courage to really attempt to hit these notes. And I think I just found out one day, like I actually don't know what I'm doing, but I know how to do this.
Yes.
And it kind of became like this thing where I kept kind of a secret. And I remember my best friend, he moved in with us when I was in high school, and he knew everything about me except for this. And I remember one day making a joke that I could sing like that. And we were listening to something. It might have been even Boyz II Men. I don't know. And he was like, whatever, dude. And I was like, no, I kind of figured it out. Like, I can. And I did it. And he was just like, what? I had no idea. And it kind of gave me like this validation. Like, okay, so I'm not crazy in thinking that I can sound just like that. And then, I was kind of getting into grunge at the time through, I think my first obviously I knew of Nirvana and I knew of Pearl Jam, but the thing that really grabbed me by the throat and was like, listen to this, was Super Unknown. And that record was like, I remember going, I want to know how to do that. Like, how do I take what I'm already doing and do that? And I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how he was such a baritone, Chris Cornell, and he would go into this, not only this register, but it had this ping to it that was just like, it didn't compute in my brain. Like, is that full voice? Like, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the mechanics of it. And then my brother turned me on to this band called Live, which I quickly dismissed. I was like, he played me the beginning of Throwing Copper, and there's this song called Damn It Otter Creek. And I remember hearing it, and I was like, I don't know, this is a little weird for me. But then I found myself stealing his cassette one day and just really listening, and I was just like, this might be the best thing I've ever heard. There was something about Ed Kowalczyk's voice that felt accessible to mine and what I was already doing, and I like instantly found myself imitating him. Like, I found myself able to do the things that I found so cool about his voice. I was like, oh, I naturally have that. I know how to access that. And then later I found myself, once I was able to kind of find that placement and kind of extrapolate that and apply it to other singers like Maynard and Chris Cornell and Lane Staley, and I was just like kind of finding trial by fire, really. And I was, going back to as a kid, I was always obsessed with, like I said, singers, George Michael, Michael Jackson, Prince. And I found myself wanting to be those guys, but I didn't find myself, I wasn't like, I want to be a singer like them. I just wanted to be them. They were so freaking cool and their character and their persona that I was just drawn to that for whatever reason. And I had no idea, even an inkling of an idea that music was even gonna be a part of my life. Like, it wasn't even something that, like, I wasn't putting the two together. I was just obsessed with like cool characters and and so it started to kind of make sense later. I had a friend in high school, and this is the impetus of becoming who I am. Like, this moment that I'm about to tell you is was kind of like the light bulb. We were in algebra class. I had a friend of mine and by the way, I'd been around music all my life. My dad plays guitar. My granddad played lap steel and guitar, and it wasn't music that I was into. You know, they played country, and it just didn't. You know, I think I remember my dad trying to show me a few chords when I was like 9, and I was like, okay, I'm done. You know what I mean? And so fast forward to 10th grade, I believe. 10th or 11th grade, I'm in algebra class with my friend Robert Nesbitt, which I've countlessly credited him for my career. He played guitar, but he was playing stuff I liked. I remember hearing him. One day we were kind of messing around in class. Class was over, but we had some free time, and he was playing acoustic guitar, Fell on Black Days, and I was like, ooh, that's my jam. Yeah. And we just kind of started bonding over music, but he still didn't know I was a singer. That wasn't something I'd really disclosed. And one day, my algebra teacher, he was super cool, Ron Schultz, we're still friends today. He was this young teacher at the time. I think it was his like first or second year at the school. I think he got bored and ran out of things to give us. So he was like, hey, we're going to put you in groups, and I want you guys to write a song/poem using the terms that we learned this week.
Oh, cool.
And I've never done anything like this. I've never wrote a poem, never. So we happened to team up with this girl that I'm spacing, and I feel terrible because I cannot remember her name. I'd have to go through my yearbook, but I'm gonna call her out one day. And she wrote poetry. So it was me, Robert Nesbitt, and I can't remember her name, and I feel terrible about that. We wrote this song called Average. And it was, she had the lyrics written out, and I was like, Robert, how about come over to my house later today and let's actually do this? He's like, what do you mean? I was like, let's actually
make a song.
Let's make a song out of this and let's perform it.
Yeah.
And I can't even believe I'm saying this because I've never done this in my life. Well, I kind of have. We'll go back to that because that's a funny story, but not seriously.
Yeah.
So he was like, cool. So he comes over after school and he starts playing this beautiful finger-picking ballad. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like, let's do a ballad. Let's like really milk this thing here. And so I'm looking at the lyrics and I can't remember them. I wish I still had them. And I don't remember the melody, but I remember being terrified and nervous, but I knew what I was capable of, but I was terrified. And I just started kind of, this low register, and he was like, dude, you sound like Tracy Chapman. And I was like, I love Tracy Chapman. That's awesome. And I kind of was like, oh, I kind of have a melody for this. And it was making sense to me. And I kind of got this feeling of like, man, we're creating something really cool here. And so later we played it for my parents, and they were like, they didn't even know. I mean, they heard me sing, in the car and stuff, but nothing serious. And they were like, this is really good, guys. And so we took it to school the next day, and I was like, Mr. Schultz, we want to play this song. And he's like, all right. By the end of the day, he had me and Robert in every single one of his classes.
Nice.
And then we started playing live covers, and it became a thing. And I was like, okay, I got the bug. Like, you got to teach me some chords. Like, I want to write songs, but I want to be able to do it. I want to know how to do this too. And so he showed me a few chords, and for whatever reason, I guess it was the combination of the desire was there.
Yeah.
And now I have an ear for what I'm trying to go for here, and I've got these songs that I love so much that I want to reference, And I started putting all this together and started writing my own song. Well, I started learning throwing copper top to bottom. And then Secret Samadhi came out, and I was like, my head exploded.
We'll get to that in a minute. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, and so we started writing songs, and he had a cover band that he was in. He's like, you should come out and sing a few songs with us. They already had a singer. And so I sang in his band for a while, and we did a few like coffee shops here and there, and they were doing like Dave Matthews covers, stuff I wasn't really into, but then we'd throw in the occasional live song and U2 and then I was like, Robert, I love you, bro, but I want to start my own band. And me and my friend that moved in with me, he was my bass player. He picked. We were basically learning everything together. We both sucked. We were, we both were rudimentary as you could get. And but we were learning together, and we had a friend in math class that was also a drummer, and we were like, Mark, come on, let's make a band. So we actually started practicing at Robert's house.
Nice.
Because he had a garage.
Right.
So he I look at him as like I don't even think he thinks twice about it, but just the bond we created and him teaching me these chords and kind of nurturing and kind of twisting my arm a little bit, like, dude, I was like, I don't want to. He kind of pulled me, in this direction, and I got obsessed, and I was like, everything that I thought I was, everything that I thought I wanted to do, I was going to go to school for acting. I wanted to be a comic book artist. I was into martial arts. I was into bodybuilding, like everything but music. And all of a sudden, all of that was like meaningless to me. It just fell away, and I was like, I think I want to do this. I think I want to do this. So that was kind of the start of me realizing that I wasn't going to college.
So what I love about this so far is that you started as a primitive, curious mimic, right? I mean, you're listening to cartoon characters, you're taking these sounds and you're experimenting with them in your own voice, and there's no judgment coming from you. You're just like, I wonder if I could sound like Bugs Bunny.
I think one of my favorites was Marvin the Martian.
Uh-huh.
Oh dear,
Right. And this was creating a flexibility with your voice that from a very young age you were able to be flexible and experimental without passing judgment on how you sound. And in my main course that I teach, we actually start out at the beginning of the course imitating Mel Blanc characters. I mean, that's
incredible.
That's the thing that we do. And you stumbled upon that just as a natural, curious kid.
Yeah.
And then what I love about it is that in the midst of this playful experimentation, which you just said, like, you weren't going for like being good or initially trying, you just liked these guys like Prince and stuff because they were cool, not because you thought you could actually do it. But these two worlds collided, right? This like, oh, I can do weird things with my voice, and these guys in their own way are doing weird things with their voice. And I had the same moment when I first heard Super Unknown. It was this, how, I can talk like him. Absolutely. And I can sing the low parts, but then there's this godly thing happening. Totally blew my mind. But I had the same sort of thing where I had Super Unknown, and then I had this handful of albums over here that were way more accessible to me. I can do this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just so fun to hear you progress like that. And it started with playful experimentation and non-judgment. That you and even in that moment, in those moments, you had people going, huh, that's interesting. I didn't know that you could actually, and you fed on that reinforcement and the physical sensational reinforcement, and those started to gel. That's awesome.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the emulation really, really worked out for me when I heard Live was coming to town, and at this point I had gotten pretty decent at guitar, and I could play, you know, a lot of the songs off of Secret Samadhi. And I called the radio station. This wasn't a contest, by the way, but I called them up. And this was back when radio stations would answer the phone, and you would actually be on the radio,
right?
If you called at the right time, you're like, oh my God, this is happening. And so I called them up, landline. Obviously, this is back in the '90s, and I said, hey, I know that you guys aren't doing this, but if I could sing like Ed Kowalczyk on the air, could I get tickets to the show? And they were like, oh, this is going to be good. This is either going to be really terrible. Either way, we're all ears. So I picked up my guitar and I played Turn My Head. And it was dead silent. And they were like, hold on a minute. We're going to put you on hold. Like, they were like jaw dropped. And they came back and were like, yeah, buddy, you got 2 tickets. No problem.
That's
that
awesome.
Was like ridiculous. And my brother and his wife were in the other room like high-fiving. And then they played it. They put it on the air. And I was like, oh my God, this is possible. Like, because I heard it back and I'm like, and then I go to that show and I was very much a student. Like, mm-hmm. I'm looking around, everybody's losing their mind. I'm losing my mind, but I'm also going, how is he that's even better than the what? Mm-hmm. Oh my God, my head's about to explode. And I was like, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. What I just saw is absolutely, like, it was in that moment, I was 17 years old. It was in that moment that I was like, there's no question in my mind. I don't care how famous I get. It's not about that. I want to do that for the rest of my life. And it changed my life in that moment.
So that's Live's sophomore album, right?
Well, actually, I thought it was. And then I found out they had a first one called Mental Jewelry.
Oh, so Throwing Copper was like their breakout album.
Throwing Copper was the second album, but it was the one that sent them to the stratosphere. Right. And then Secret Samadhi came out. And you know... it took me a minute to wrap my head around that record because it wasn't as radio accessible as Throwing Copper, which had like hit after hit after hit.
Right.
But there was things that he was doing vocally.
Yes.
In that record that made me just in love with the album.
Ed's got this desperate, nervous distortion about his voice.
Yeah.
That you have to be in a certain mind state, like you almost have to like sit on something uncomfortable and whine about it a little bit, and then sigh from the mild amount of pain, and then you then you get that sound.
My vibrato definitely came from listening to that record. That really sharp, fast vibrato, and it became kind of just this instinctual thing that I can't really get rid of now. And so that there was such an urgency about the way he sang that record. One of my favorite songs on that album is Graze. And when that chorus hits, from the juxtaposition from that low, like, people should not be afraid, you know, and then forget your mother and your father, you know.
Yeah.
It's just so, it was like, it gave me chills. And man, that record was a slow grower for me, but it is probably my favorite live album to date.
Wow. So you'd made the decision that this is what you were going to do, and you'd already been dabbling with mathematics, songwriting, and playing live songs on the radio.
Yeah.
And did you find yourself at that point, like I know you said you were being a student at that live show. Did you catch yourself going down specific vocal rabbit holes, even at that age, like listening to a particular song, for example, and being like, I got to figure that riff out. Like for me, which I would later discover how to do it, but when I was younger, I listened to that portion of The Day I Tried to Live where he was right as he's going to that final out, right? I woke the same as any other day, you know. You know. Yeah. It was that I would wear out every cassette, and I would, were there moments like that where you were just like surgical into, I want to know how they did that and putting it into your voice? And if so, what were some of those areas?
I remember doing that with Tool.
Yeah.
Because he has such a beautiful, haunting tone, and I was like, ooh, I can do that. But then he would get up into this bitey, like, and I've taken things from every one of these singers,
right,
and applied it to my, there's this belt that also has the growl, that also has the bite, but it also has this support and compression and control that doesn't feel like it's gonna get away from him. And
right.
And I really loved how that sounded, and I was like, and I think it kind of taught me compression and taught me how to like really hold it up in here without it feeling like it's like a balloon losing all its air.
Yes.
And so I would usually get obsessed with one particular song, and I would drive and listen to it ad nauseum, and I would, some days it felt like I knew how to do it, and then there were days where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the gist of my abilities all the way up into my late 20s, where some days I felt like it was there and some days it didn't, but I didn't understand why. And I didn't understand why it was so easy on this particular day, and vice versa. And I remember doing that with shows too, where I'd have shows at gigs and I would be like, I don't even know how I just did that, but it felt so free and it felt like open and like everything was there when I needed it. And then there's other times where I feel like I'm trying to force to get it out, and I didn't quite understand the mechanism and what I was actually doing.
Yeah.
At the time, and since I've, I'm still trying to figure certain things out.
Sure.
But I still go down the rabbit hole. I'm never satisfied with where I'm at, because I'm like, yeah, I can do that all day, but what about what he's doing? What about what Johnny Hawkins is doing and nothing more? Like, that's something cool.
Yeah. That's
like, or Noah Sebastian or Vessel, or, like, I can do this soulful thing all day, but then he goes, and I'm like, how did he do that?
Yeah, and switching between them.
But anyway, but it's still like, and then having to apply that in context,
right,
and knowing how to go from one to the other. So I've always been fascinated with things that I can't do, and like, damn it, I'm gonna figure this out.
Yeah.
By the end of the day, I'm gonna know how to do this, whether I get taught or I just blow my voice out trying. I'm gonna eventually figure it out, and I love that. I love that I love actually seeing singers that make me jealous, and there's quite a few of them out there.
Yeah. I like that you just said that I'm going to figure this out whether I get it or blow my voice out trying, and not being afraid of, it's not like you are blowing your voice out for 3 weeks straight trying something. Right. You're listening to your body. Clearly, you're still singing at the top of your game after all these years. So many students are afraid, if I sit here and try to emulate X or try to scream or sing with compression or use mixed voice or whatever, and I'm afraid I'm gonna ruin my voice. Do I have a node? I better get a camera shoved down my throat to make sure I'm not damaged. And what people don't understand, and what people need to hear more of, is that every single singer who is at the top of their game right now and having a career as a vocalist regularly tires their voice out, regularly blows their voice out, trying new things.
I have sang sick. I've sang with a blown voice. I've done 7 in a row. I've never once had a node. I get scoped all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm hyper aware. I'm very connected to my body. I'm very aware of what things feel like. I don't blindly just go out there and blow my voice out. I don't want to misrepresent it. But some days it's there, some days it isn't. And you pivot and you learn how to maneuver around it. And
that's
sometimes
the key, though.
You change the note. Sometimes you change the note, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Well,
see, that's the key. Is you are experimenting from a hyper aware, introspective state. You are asking yourself as you're going into this one line from the Nothing More song, and experimenting with that. You're leaning into sensations that feel okay, squaring that with how it sounds, and then evaluating. And if you don't have that feel before sound or sensation before sound mindset, that's where you really do injure yourself. Because you might go, oh, that sounds okay, but it doesn't feel okay. Oh, well, it sounds okay. I'm just going to keep going.
Right.
And then before you know it, you have burnt yourself out to the point to where it's not sounding as good as it was, but it's still sounding okay, so I'm going to keep going. And this is how people screw their voice up. Whereas if you lean into the sensations first with a highly introspective mindset and are patient with yourself, my body's telling me I'm done for the day. I didn't quite get that end of the Corey Taylor song, but I'm gonna move on. That's the way to do it. We have to be introspective and we have to listen to our body. And along those lines, you have been you were into martial arts early on, and you went through this period when I think you're still in this period of being very in tune with your body from a holistic muscle standpoint, like strength training, cardio training, and
that's when I really get to test out the different sounds.
Right.
When I'm working out, I've got whatever at the Bad Omens or whatever blasting.
Yeah.
That's when I'm like, that's when I feel free to like really dig in, and I figure stuff out sometimes that way. And I actually figured some things out this morning. I was like, oh, that's how he does that.
Yes. It's so funny because you've probably seen it in some of my videos, but I'm always telling people like, you want to get compression down, the first thing you want to do is lift something heavy. And then try to place that sensation as high in your throat as possible. And you're discovering stuff literally while you're lifting heavy weights.
Yeah,
and trying.
Absolutely.
There's so many connections.
It was actually the summoning was playing.
Nice.
And that scream part. Not summoning. Vor.
Yes, Vor. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, I got it. I figured it out. Because it's so weird, and it goes back to the Chris Cornell conversation. What you're hearing and what you think it feels like to do that is so drastically juxtaposed that, like, as a kid, I thought, oh, Cornell's just going up in his chest voice.
Right.
And that's all just, like, that's just impossible for me. I didn't understand the flip. I didn't understand the getting up in the head voice. And then when I figured that out one day, I was like, that feels too easy to be right.
Uh-huh.
And then I would hear it back going, but I think that's it. That's
absolutely.
all he's doing?
Yep.
Like, what? And it blew my mind. Like, oh, we make things out to be harder than they really are. When you hear it, it sounds like, how is that even humanly possible? And that's why I'm so fascinated with your channel, because I seen you talk about things, and I was like, oh, so I am doing it right, because I didn't have vocal training as a kid. I didn't have these resources when I was trying to figure it out. I couldn't go to YouTube and go, oh, okay, that sounds like what I'm doing, the way he just described that.
Yeah.
And when I heard you talk about compression, and, I always said, oh, it's just kind of like, I worked with Ron Anderson
cool.
years ago, rest his soul. Yeah. And he kind of described it to me like, it's kind of like taking a dump. You know what I mean? It's
Absolutely.
Like,
Use your poop muscles.
It's burying it down, and and that made sense to me. But I always thought of that as, oh, well, that's straining. But it's not.
No.
It's compression.
Yeah.
And so I would always question my own technique. Even if I wasn't hurting, I was like, am I doing this right?
Yep.
Because I didn't have enough of the fundamental knowledge or understanding of that is actually how you do this.
Yeah.
So I would always think, because I didn't have training, that I was just doing it wrong, and it just happened to sound okay.
Another thing that really has spoken to me over the years is watching or listening to super underground recordings of some of these guys. Like listening to Chris Cornell live on I-5, for example. Those aren't the greatest recordings, or even like really early Soundgarden, where he's doing these. He's making these sounds that are way more accessible than what you hear on the studio recordings. Right?
Yeah.
When he's doing, Little Joe, for example, Little Joe, run for the borders. When he's doing that sort of sound, it's like, well, I can do that. Maybe I can't hit that high D5 the way he does on Spoonman, but I can certainly do that. But then you hear that, and then you hear him do Spoonman live, or even like,
and then the adding of the vibrato with that. Mm-hmm. That's where it gets like, oh, that's saucy.
Yeah. It's this context. I think we hear, when we're listening in our dumbfounded states, what we're really impressed with, that we don't know we're impressed with, we're really impressed with the context that they've created. Right? Like, that's why I love doing isolated vocal analysis so much. Because when you get to hear these notes without the band, without the mix, without some of the effects, they become human. It's like, oh, okay, yes, I can actually hear how that feels now. Whereas I can't really hear how it feels when I've got everything around it, and when there's been this, 65,000 takes to get it in comps, to get it to where...
Right.
So, yeah, I want to go back to this like listening to your body, and you figuring out how to sing while you're lifting weights. And when did you get serious about bodybuilding or strength training?
Yeah.
And realize how much of a help that was in connecting with your voice?
Well, I was always, all of my interests, I have always kind of existed in distinct silos. I never really combined them. I would be obsessed with one thing, and then I would move on to something else. And then I never really realized they were all connected. I was obsessed with comic books, so therefore I wanted to look like a comic book character. Therefore, I got into bodybuilding. And I was obsessed with martial arts. Therefore, I got into, martial arts because of the movies I was into, like Van Damme and Bruce Lee. And they all kind of are connected in a way. It's this, it's mind-body connection.
Absolutely.
And so as a teenager, I was this scrawny little kid, just could not gain a pound no matter how much I ate. And I started getting into like fitness magazines and started taking like Weight Gainer and lifted every day during lunch. So everybody else would be in the lunchroom. I would go to the gym. And within like 3 months, I had completely changed. I don't know if it was just because of like, my growth spurt or whatever. I was like 15 or 16, and I got obsessed with it, and it became like something that I love to do all the time. And I kind of got away from it when life got crazy in my 20s, kids, and wondering how I'm going to pay bills. And And so I kind of have always been on this like up down swing of I'm getting fit. Now I'm living very unhealthy. Now I'm fit. And it's when I got on the road for the first time, things got really out of hand. Just late night drinking, eating, God knows, like late night Taco Bell runs and and just garbage.
Yeah.
And you don't realize just how much your voice does not like that the next day. Acid reflux, all the things. And so around 2013, I kind of got serious about it again. But then during COVID, I was like, I'm not getting any younger, man. I'm 40 at the time. I was like 41, and I just made it a decision. Like this can't just be I'm into this
sometimes
here and there. I'm into it now, but I'll come back to it. Like it has to be a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it became a lifestyle. I became obsessed with it for the right reasons, not just like, a little fad here and there. I'm just trying to get a six pack or whatever. Like I wanted my life I wanted to feel good all the time. Mm-hmm. And once I realized how much better I felt on stage and how much I barely break a sweat on stage anymore. And I wonder, like, am I working hard enough? Because I've conditioned myself so much that I'm running all over the place. I'm jumping off the barricade or back onto the stage, and even the guys are like, "Dude, you should be doing American Ninja Warrior." Right. I find myself just, I'm not winded. I'm not. I feel more in control of my instrument than I've ever felt in my life, and so I think it plays a big role in the control and the health of your voice.
Well, not only is it an accessory or a vehicle for you to discover new things, because you're free to grunt and do things as you want to while you're lifting weights, but there's this sense of you can't lift weights and expect immediate results. There's this trajectory that you have to put yourself on, and then over time your muscles develop. Over time, you lose fat, but this thing that happens over time is something that you can see, feel, experience measurable progress. Our voices they're just muscle and tissue controlled by our mind, which is the same thing as the bicep, which is the same thing, So it's very allegorical, right? We have this, 3 months later, I can now see my abs again, and I can lift heavier weights. I'm not winded on stage, whatever. I mean, it sounds like we both experience the same things with our voices. Mm-hmm. I've been making this sound now in these short increments, these short training sessions or experimental things while I'm lifting or screaming in the car or whatever it is. And then you look back almost without thinking about it, going, oh yeah, 3 months ago I couldn't really make that sound the way I make. I mean, I was making the start of that sound, but now I'm making it and it's more seasoned. It's beefier. It's because the muscle memory. You got
the mind and body connection.
Yes.
And you know how to access that feeling.
Yes. Yeah. The muscle memory is there. The sensations are squaring now with the sound, but it takes a long view, at the minimum, a mid-range view. And that's why I think athletics, I mean, any sport, but particularly weight training, because it teaches you to focus in, I'm not feeling this particular sensation in my bicep the way I want to feel it. Well, think about your bicep as you're doing the rep, and then you will feel it there. And I tell people that all the time with the voice. I'm not feeling this particular sensation. I'm not feeling it resonate in my mask. Or I'm not feeling the compression high. Okay, choose to focus your attention there or here, and over time, this will develop, and then you won't have to think about it as much.
I started having, years ago, really bad tendinitis and muscle tears because I'd kind of just gotten back into it, and I just was like, oh, I'm gonna be like I used to, and I didn't have that mind-body connection. And I remember one day going into the gym and just doing the lightest of weights just to kind of get back into it, and to feel the contraction without the weight is the key.
Yes.
If you can, because you start to really feel and just be present with your body, because a lot of people are not present with their body in the gym. You see them like doing stuff like that, and you're like, what are you working out? What are you training for?
Yeah. Yep.
And I started to just become more present in life, really, which starts to trickle down into every other aspect of your life. And I stopped having injuries. I started having gains. I started to really, and also, going back to the working out and singing, I actually found I used to not be able to do it at all, but I also found that when you are able to, it means you're doing it right. If you can compress that breath and run on a treadmill and belt out Shinedown, then you're doing something right. And I started to really kind of gauge my progress with how well I could sing while working out, because it meant that I was able to control the breath. I wasn't over exerting. I wasn't over pushing. And I don't know, maybe there's something to that.
Yeah, it's like you're more than working out the muscle, more than tearing the muscle, more than phonating or vocalizing. You're training yourself to be present to your body in multiple ways. And you were joking about people going to the gym and doing flailing around and doing all sorts of things. Vocalists do that all the time, right? And especially when they're trying to sing like someone else. Oh, I want to go sing like this person, and they flail around because based on what they hear, they make incorrect assumptions. They blow their voice out trying with these incorrect assumptions, and then get discouraged and then stop, and then they go back at it again. They're not training that be present to your body, be present to how things feel, and this parallel between strength training and being present with your body and being able to sing and vocalize and discover things in the midst of that sort of dual setup is gold. Like, you want to improve? Learn multiple ways to be present to your body at the same time. And your voice is going to skyrocket, and you're going to look better and feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And feel great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, there's nothing like, I look at pictures on stage now and I'm like, oh, I'm finally like, this is who I've always wanted to be, and I feel more confident on stage than I've ever. I remember just years of, felt like posturing, I'm like, am I doing what I saw somebody else do and that's what I should do here?
Yeah.
And I wasn't free. And so there's a reason I say that, because that also puts restriction on your voice.
Sure.
Because you're sitting there thinking about trying to look like somebody that you're not. You're also trying to sound like somebody you're not. And all of a sudden, you can't do it. Right. Because you're using improper technique. You're not free in your instrument and your body. In
your own expression. Yeah, you're not free. Yeah, you're not being yourself. You're trying to be someone else.
To create your version of that.
Yep. And then what you don't realize is that in that moment, you're judging yourself because you're not sure you can really do it. And so simultaneously, you're going, well, if I'm judging myself, everybody out there watching me is probably judging me too. And then you just implode. So you can't. Now, this is good. I want to go.
It's like the dream where you're naked in front of class
yes!
and you're like, I'm
exposed. So you're at this moment now, but you didn't understand this when you were auditioning for Idol. I want to talk about the auditioning for Idol and that whole process and like being judged. I mean, the whole thing is about judgment, right?
Yeah.
You're being judged there. And then I want to juxtapose that with your experience on The Masked Singer and how much you've grown between the two, and tie in what you just said about, really coming into your own and being present to your own body and your own experiences and being able to be yourself. Talk about that
Yeah.
in light of these two hyper public experiences.
Yeah, I can't watch any of my performances from Idol anymore, because there were certainly elements of what I do now still there.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the control or the access to freely do those things, because I was, at the time, I felt like I knew who I was.
Yeah.
Looking back, I was very much still in the mimicking or trying to mimic phase, or
Yeah.
trying to sound like something, and trying to produce a sound that I thought it needed to sound like, as opposed to just being free with my voice.
Right.
And so I would lose my voice all the time on Idol. I would get one song done, and I was like, how am I going to do this next week? Meanwhile, I had already been playing in clubs for almost 10 years at that point. But I still think it was like I said earlier, there were days where I'm like, oh, it's all there. And then there were days where I didn't know how I got there. So then you try to get there with what you think you did, and you're creating a different sound than what it was when it was actually free. And you don't know how to kind of reconcile the two, so you end up overdoing it. And we didn't have ear monitors, by the way, on Idol.
Right.
So you're chasing the wedges that are in the floor. Sometimes you can hear good, sometimes you can't. And I have a tendency to, if I can't hear myself well, I will absolutely overdo it.
Right. You'll push so that you can't. Yep.
Yeah, because I'm trying to compensate for my own volume, and I don't even realize, I don't feel like I'm pushing harder, but I am.
Yeah.
Because I can feel it instantly after I'm done.
Yep.
So that was terrifying. Idol was I had been playing in clubs for essentially the guest list for 8 to 10 years, and then now I'm on national television. But the audition process, Denver, Colorado, it's where I auditioned, because the audition got canceled that I was going to do I was living in North Carolina at the time, and it was supposed to be in Memphis. And Katrina just happened, so
Right.
that got canceled. And the next city was Denver, and so the people at my job raised up some money to fly me to Denver. And I was at Broncos Stadium, 5:30 in the morning, in a long line, and I have no idea how this is going to work. I just knew I needed to do something.
Yeah.
I was tired of spinning wheels, and I had auditioned for Rockstar NXS the year before that, and that didn't work out. So I was like, well, and I always had this, it was always hard for me to, reconcile that feeling of, would any of my heroes do this? There's always that in the back of your mind, judging yourself. Would Prince do this? Would Chris Cornell have done this? Would they have gone out for a TV show like this? So it was already this thought of, there's nobody doing, this kind of rock on the show. So the chances of me even being on the show are slim to none. What's there to lose?
Yeah.
And I go out there, and the original audition, they bring you in different lines out on the field. At least that's how it was at this. I don't know how they do it now. But each line had a producer. So each person at the front of that line would step up to their respective producer, and you're all singing roughly at the same time. But you're spread far apart enough where it's, you're not, math sucks, but I'm thinking 10 to 15 yards apart.
Yeah.
Right? And I step up and I belt out CCR's version of I Put a Spell on You. And it was all one color. It was all just, all right. Up in that nasally grit, just going for it. Everybody stopped singing and was like, because I was louder than everybody. Right. And they were like, yeah, you go on through, buddy. And then the next day I had to audition for the executive producers. And they were like, and I did the same thing, same song. And they were like, nah, it's too aggressive. If you're gonna do something with some rasp, maybe do some Joe Cocker. And I'm like, I don't listen to Joe Cocker, but okay. And so they suggested to do The Letter.
Right.
For Simon, Randy, and Paula. So I worked up a version of that felt like me. And I go in there and I'm just terrified. I'm not focusing on being a performer and getting, and showing star power or making sure that they like me. I just want to get these freaking notes right and sound and nail every part of this so I can get on this show and hopefully get some gigs. You know what I mean? Like that's my thought process. Get out there just enough so that I can go back home and play gigs and make a living. What's
interesting, so I want to highlight something you just said. Like you weren't thinking about entertaining, you were just thinking about getting the notes right.
Yeah.
But you had this playful past of, you've been, like you said, you've been gigging for 10 years. But
I was in a band and I had a guitar.
Right.
And now I'm like,
and in this moment, being under the microscope, you're focusing on the opposite of what you need to focus on to get through the door. And Simon called you on it, right?
Yes, he did. Here's the thing. I wanted to be upset, but I've also been the kind of person to go, okay, there's always truth in the criticism, so let's really think about what he's saying. So when I went back and I watched that audition, I was like, he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I was stiff as a freaking board.
Yeah.
And I looked like I was a deer in the headlights. And yeah, I'm actually happy with the notes that came out, but there was a stiffness and this like rigidity that I'm actually kind of, I feel like I'm kind of lucky that I got in, and I was able to kind of shake that off. But I did talk to him later that day. I saw him getting into his car, and I happened to be walking down the street, and I was like, I'll prove you wrong when I get to Hollywood. And he goes, you do that. Yeah. And I could tell that he saw something.
Yeah.
But he was also not letting me get away with it.
Yeah. Well, I just find it so cool to, number one, that you got through anyway, but your musicality and the things that you had done before that point got you to a place where even though you were in the wrong headspace, you were able to get through it, right?
Right. And I think I knew my voice enough, and I felt like I had enough control to do that part right.
Uh-huh.
But there was this terrifying aspect because now I don't have my guitar.
Yeah.
I'm not rocking out. I'm not in a bar.
Yeah.
I'm not in that element. This feels very different than what I'm used to.
Yeah.
And I kind of locked up a little.
So at what point in that whole process, as you were on the show, were there ever performances where you did feel like, I am not focused on being good right now. I'm focused on just being me and experiencing my voice for what it is. Were there ever anything like that on Idol?
Yeah. I feel like all of those started to feel more. I started to get more comfortable with the aspect of being just a front man and not hiding behind a guitar and not having a band behind me. And I feel like it was the first week
Oh, cool.
Once, because Hollywood Week was what kind of, I think, I started to kind of get more in my body with the idea of just performing and not really, and not leaning on the things that I was used to doing. So I know that years after that, they allowed contestants to play guitar and instruments, but I'm actually really glad that I wasn't able to, because it really forced me to have to learn how to be a frontman without
a crutch,
hiding behind a crutch. And I don't think I had completely figured it out on the show, but it got me past that, or it got me to that next level. So once I started touring, it became more and more comfortable.
What was it like?
And I've just been kind of developing that character ever since.
Right. What was it like being coached for the show? I've always wondered, because I actually talked to someone. You're shaking your head. But
I learned nothing.
Really?
I learned nothing about my voice on that show that I didn't learn from myself. It was the most bizarre. Like, when I think back, I was like, nobody taught me anything that I didn't already do. No one pulled me aside and goes, hey, I see what you're going for. Try this. It's going to be much easier. Like, nothing.
Really?
I don't know what anybody else dealt with, but I don't know they didn't give me any useful information on
people listening to your voice and offering you suggestions. And what are the coaches doing? What kinds of things did they run?
They're putting you through, like, group warm-ups where you're all in a group, and it wasn't anything. Yeah, I'm not gonna badmouth anybody, but it feels like there could have been room for some real development there, especially for these kids that have never performed in front of a crowd in their life, and this is their first chance. I had at least been in bars, and maybe they thought that oh, this guy kind of knows what he's doing. I'm not going to mess with what, he's kind of got his thing. And maybe I had that attitude, and maybe that's why, maybe I just kind of came off where I didn't need advice. Maybe I was kind of a douchebag. I don't know. But yeah, I don't recall any like, oh, that's how you do, like, had we worked together, right. I feel like I could have probably tapped into something really cool. But it was very, very basic. They would run you through a few scales, you'd run through your arrangement, and then you'd go perform it with the band. Like, that was kind of get thrown to the wolves.
Well, and they're trying to exist within a particular system, and they've got lots of people that they're working with at the same time and stuff. So it's hard to, like, target, like, you try, you know.
Yeah. I think some contestants had their own vocal coaches coming out, Yeah. I never had worked with one, so I didn't even know what to look for.
Sure. Well, okay, so fast forward then, you did all sorts of great stuff between Idol and The Masked Singer, but there's almost this sense of, like, you being teleported, like, from experience to experience. I mean, I know that tons of amazing things happen in between there, but there must have been all this sort of deja vu. But, like, talk about the differences in mind space that you were in between having have this career now, and and now you're here on The Masked Singer, and I'm really excited to hear about this.
Idol was, I think Idol was so terrifying that even when we've gone back as Daughtry to perform, I still get nervous, like I'm about to get judged and kicked off. Like, there's this feeling of, it's like this memory that sticks with that stage. Whereas Masked Singer felt like this freedom. You're, behind this veil of anonymity.
Yeah.
Which just, it's kind of like going back to your childhood mimicking cartoon voices.
Yep.
There's this feeling of, I can do anything in this. And it doesn't matter because they don't know I'm me. And there's nobody to judge because they don't know what I'm capable of.
Yes.
So they don't know what to base it on or to really. So when I got approached, if this would be something interesting for me, I was like, absolutely. I had seen this video of Ryan Reynolds doing the Tokyo or the Korean version in this unicorn costume, and I'd never heard of it before. And then they unveil it, and it's him, and I was like, that looks like the most fun experience ever.
Yeah.
Just to go out and sing whatever you want without any kind of preconceived notions of what you should sing because you're this person or that person. And, you aren't aware of any other performers. You have no idea who you're up against, which is fantastic because I would have been shitting my pants if I would have known that I was up against Patti LaBelle, Seal. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, right.
And they were literally on the same stage minutes before me, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I'm watching it on TV going, thank God I didn't know. Because I would have been, I can't do this song. I got to switch it. Because
all the mind games that you didn't have to put yourself through. That is so awesome.
None of it. Oh. None of it. I remember they were doing this, they were doing the, and you were never even allowed to be around them. There was this one time that they pulled us all out in our costumes and they were going to do a bumper shot, and we all waved. And I'm sitting here and I'm in this and you're more present than ever because you don't have a choice. Yeah. You can't talk to them because nobody can hear each other's voice. You can, Mickey Mouse it, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking around and I'm like, this must be what it's like to be on acid. Like, this is the craziest, trippiest thing I've ever been a part of. And it was so, like, it kind of made you, like, I don't know, there was this presence about it that just felt really free and fun and, like, I could go out and dance, and I actually could dance as a kid. Like I could mimic some of the the latest dances that were coming out back in the 90s. That was something that I've always kind of been the type of person that, and maybe it is the mind body connection that I have. But if I see it, I can figure it out.
Sure.
Same with watching Van Damme movies. I could see him do it. I would figure it out. And it was kind of attractive to me that I could go out and do things that I couldn't do as Daughtry. That I could go out and I could do these dance routines and I could sing songs that maybe I would never think of covering because I just love songs and I love singers and I love Hall & Oates. I love, Ed Sheeran. I love, being able to do these and Bruno Mars and so I had the most fun doing this show because it wasn't about winning a place. Like, it wasn't about, like, getting a record deal or anything. There was nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I just felt free to go out and have fun.
I would even...
But I couldn't breathe. Like, you cannot breathe. And those are live vocals. And you're in rehearsal, you don't have everything on.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake.
Oh, and then you have all this stuff.
Soon as you put that mask on and you do one dance step, it's like you feel like you're recycling your own air and you're singing in a paper bag.
Right.
So that became very, very difficult. But it also it forced me to really, dial it back and really try to stay in the pocket and not go so reckless abandon with the notes. And I look at those performances and I'm pumped. I'm like, I sounded great. I'm really happy with that. I'll go back and look at the Idol stuff and I'm like, oh my God, that note was all over the place. That I lost all control over that register right there when I was doing the Queen song that I was, so pumped to do, and I nailed it in rehearsal. I go out there on the live taping and it just goes all over the place, and it was like too much air coming out of the balloon,
Right.
Just that loss of mind-body connection, blowing too much air
due to judgment,
control
starts here,
and
right?
the judgment.
Yeah. So
there were very different experiences.
The Masked Singer, I wish everybody could choose to put themselves in some of the mind states that you found yourself in. This idea that you don't have to be judged as yourself. And therefore, since nobody's passing judgment on you, you are free to be whoever, however, and experiment and do all these different things. That's massively huge. I have heard other performers say that they only feel comfortable going out on stage and performing and singing well or to their potential when they put themselves in the very state that you found yourself in. Oh, this isn't me. This is an alternate version of me. This is a way that I can express myself, but I'm not really fully myself, and therefore I'm not being judged. Like, me is not being judged. This character over here is just being expressive. And to like separate that then allows you to be free to do all these wonderful things. You had this infrastructure around you that was allowing you to be here. But I guess my question is, has that experience moving forward, have you found yourself in that same sort of mind state because of the messing? Like, oh, I can try whatever I want on stage right now just because I'm Chris Daughtry, the performer who's already doing stuff. It's no big deal. Versus
that feeling has absolutely carried over into my stage performance now. I'm a completely different performer post Masked Singer than I was pre-Masked Singer.
What about vocally?
Absolutely.
Do you feel like you're a better vocalist?
I think 100%. Not because of the show, but because of that freedom and that mindset and that.
Yeah.
I used to overanalyze. Am I going to be able to hit this note tonight?
Right.
And I would beat myself up backstage doing this note over and over terribly to the point where by the time I got on stage, my voice was beat up.
Couldn't even do it.
Yeah. Now I just go, how do I feel? Can I get through the motions? Everything else is going to connect once I get out there.
Yeah.
I don't focus on the minutia of this note or this grit, or because some days the grit's different. Some days the vowels are slightly different. Some days the notes are longer. Some days they're shorter. Sometimes I'll change the melody slightly.
Yeah.
But the freedom that comes with that mindset, which, by the way, I was very conscious of that. When I was there, I was like, this is how I want to feel. I want to feel this level of freedom in my own shows. And so I've started my shows now. I wear sunglasses for the first couple songs because it kind of gets me. It's like the same thing as being behind a mask for just a minute.
Yeah.
Just to settle into this mindset of I'm a different character.
Yeah.
This isn't about, like, I don't have to look you in the eye right now and perform to you. I get to like settle into this character for a bit.
Yeah.
And it opened my world up.
Oh, that's so
cool. I've looked at performances where I just kind of cringe and I'm like, I won't do that again. It's like watching the football game the next day and going, oh yeah, this is where we messed up. But I don't do it as like a judgy thing. I just do it as a kind of in the same way I watch the live concert. I'm taking notes and I'm going, okay, but it's never as bad as I thought it was. And there were nights where I'm like, oh my God, my voice was terrible. And then I'll watch that exact video on Instagram and I'm like, oh, that's what they heard?
That's not so
okay.
bad.
Yeah. So sometimes we feel like, because we have this expectation of trying to recreate what we did on the record and trying to go for a certain sound as opposed to just being free. And I kind of got stuck on this when I was working on Cage to Rattle, because I would get so caught up in my demos that I would be trying to recreate something that I thought I was doing when really I was just free that day when I sang that demo, and that's what came out. I wasn't trying to mimic me.
Right.
And that is a very dangerous, very slippery slope.
Yeah. Yeah, that's... What I'm hearing you go back to is that this idea of separating your judgmental self from your creative self is a choice. And you learned to make that choice during The Masked Singer, but it's not that you don't need The Masked Singer to make that choice. You have to make that choice every single time.
Right.
And
I think it was one of those things that it showed me, that's what this feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was more of a realization of like, this is what it feels like to perform without thinking about, because it's not necessarily a singing competition, so they're not necessarily judging your singing abilities. So there's that thought out the window. You don't have to think about that.
Right.
I'm not competing for, any kind of, we're all celebrities up here. So it's not like we're all, our career depends on this. Right. So there was no pressure whatsoever. And I was like, why can't I feel that way at my own shows?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can. And
no other reason than just making the choice, like you said.
Right. So there are, droves of vocalists that are in a position where they will sing something or maybe even just speak something. Maybe they'll film themselves doing something, and then they'll watch back and they'll listen back, and I hate the sound of my own voice. Oh, I look like a complete moron. And then it just stops right there. Right? Yeah. The judgmental self takes over. It totally eats whatever creative self was there. Mm-hmm. In your long list of experiences, what would you say to that type of person who wants to do, they want to perform, they want to sing, they want to record, they want to write, but the judgmental self eats them alive before the creative self can even get going?
You have to give yourself a safe space, wherever that is, whether it be your car, whether it be your shower, whether it be somewhere that you know in the deep down that there's nobody outside that door standing there waiting to give you a weird look when you get out, or even something like, heard you in there, something like that can really shut someone down.
Yeah.
If you don't have the confidence to back it up. So I've found that I used to be that way. Even when I was performing on stage, if I was trying something out and one of my kids, they'd be laughing like, I heard you in there. They weren't like judging me. It was just funny to hear me, express or try something that maybe they never heard. But I took it as judgment.
Right.
I took it as like, and it would kind of, make, now, I'm so aware of what I'm doing that like, I don't care.
Right.
And I do it in the car when I'm driving the kids to school. Yeah. I'll mimic whoever is on the radio, and they laugh and they think it's funny. Yep. And I think it's funny, and because it is, I'll mimic, Brian Johnson or anyone that's like outrageous to them, like Steven Tyler and it's funny to them because it doesn't sound like anything they've ever heard me do. But there's this freedom of like, okay, we're all just having fun here. That's it.
We're all just having fun here. That's the thing.
And when you can't mimic a cartoon voice if it's not fun for you.
That's right.
It's gotta be this. You can't take it so serious that you're gonna just shut down your realm of possibilities.
Right.
Because that's something that no one else is gonna be able to do for you. You have to understand, if you really want to do this, then you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. You have to allow yourself to not take it so seriously that you limit yourself. Because I have learned, even after being in this industry 15 years, I learned something new today. I figured out something in my voice today that I couldn't do yesterday.
Yep.
And that's exciting.
Yeah.
And that feeling of excitement is so much more powerful than the feeling of limiting yourself and shutting down. Because once you experience that freedom and the feeling of accomplishment, like, oh, I just figured that out, then you're going to want to keep going.
Right.
And you're going to want to try new things out. And you got to just allow yourself to fail. Allow yourself to suck. And be okay with, that's not where the door stops.
Right. Right.
That's just, okay, I don't know it yet.
Yeah. Well, this idea of like, listening back to yourself or watching back, and you said it earlier too, and you're watching or listening and you're going, oh, that was interesting. Oh, I could have done that a little better. But you're looking at it from a learning perspective as opposed to shutting it down because you're listening to negative self-talk about what you did.
Yeah.
Right? If
I stopped when I was a teenager because I couldn't hit the Chris Cornell note, if I shut down right there, I would never be where I am now.
Yeah. Or because you didn't sound like Chris Cornell when you were trying.
Or because I couldn't sound like any of my heroes at the time. Like,
right.
You have to, like Dave Grohl said, you gotta suck.
Yeah.
You gotta allow yourself to suck.
Yeah.
And be okay with that.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. And confidently suck. Right? It's like, yeah, I suck. I know it. I was.
And by the way, I see your videos and I see like you're doing stuff that sounds ridiculous at the time, and you're like totally cool with it, right. And it's awesome, and it makes me like, I'm like, oh, okay, like I can do that too,
right?
And that's really cool that you show that. No, I'm being serious. Like a lot of people, they'll edit it out and they'll only show the good parts. Right. You're showing the process of getting to these placements and these unique sounds and different tones and different colors of your voice that I think is very important. I would have absolutely loved these resources when I was a teenager learning this. I feel excited for kids that are finding your channel.
Yeah, right. Well, thank you for saying that. It goes back to vulnerability, right? Like what you just described as far as like, you got to be willing to get to a point where you can make these sounds and nobody care. No, you don't care that other people hear or care, right? Yeah. And that's a state of vulnerability. And when you're able to be vulnerable and like, hey, yeah, I'll show this side of me because this is the side of me that allows me to be real. Then when you have nothing to hide, there's no way people can actually judge you, right? Well, you've seen you've seen the very worst of me. So now, I don't have any, I can't hide anything anymore because you've already seen my voice crack or heard my voice crack 17 times. And now let me show you what I can do with it. Now that I'm okay to let my voice crack a billion times, now I can do the, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's...
And by the way, I never thought of how brilliant it is to start with cartoon voices. Because
it is brilliant.
Because it takes all the judgment out.
Yes.
You're just having fun.
Yes.
And you realize, oh, that's the exact same tone and placement as this guy or this female.
Yes.
And I've never thought of it and put two and two together that's probably how I got to
that is how you did it.
I was comfortable to do it.
Yeah, you stumbled upon it. One of my favorite. It's kind of cool that you mentioned driving your kids to school and stuff. My kids and I, we've been going to more sports games recently because they're at the age where they're getting into sports, and we went to a Nuggets game, and they have this totally surprised me, but we went to Nuggets Blazers, and they're announcing all the Nuggets players, and they're just like, and at number 27, doing that, and then they go, and Damian Lillard. And they kind of go through and they do these two different. And so my kids and I are just sitting here cracking up at this contrast. And then I start imitating on the way home. I start, like, Murray for 3! And doing these, like, horrible imitations of the announcers. And one of my kids, he's like, it's interesting. You actually get paid to do what you're doing for me right now. And I was like, yeah, I guess I kind of do. Like, just making these stupid voices is what it is what frees you. And you're right. If you're not having fun at every stage, you lock yourself into this achievement mode. And the irony of achievement or being good or whatever is that being good or these achievements, they are results. And if you pursue results rather than pursuing the experience of the journey, you'll never get the results that you want in the first place.
No. If you're going to wait until you're good to do this, then you're never going to get good.
Right. Well, so that's a perfect segue. I want to talk. We've talked a lot about performing. And your journey there. I want to pivot over to the recording process. The writing and recording process, and how that has informed your vocal development. And let me just open by saying, I have found that pursuing things in the studio and failing miserably over and over and over and over again has been one of the things that has allowed me to succeed accidentally when I'm not in the studio, right? Yet, I was brought up on this mentality as a vocalist, like with choir and even performing in my bands as I was a teenager, that you don't want to record anything that you can't do live because you don't want to. You don't want to, fail, right? You want the studio recording to be representative of what you can do live. And I was sort of raised like that. And then I kind of turned that on its head and said, no, you know what? I'm going to use the studio to figure out things that I couldn't do live so that I could do them live. And I'm curious to know, and I've since worked with several artists, Spencer Sotelo from Periphery being one of them, who, when he was explaining this process back to me, I was like, yes, this makes so much sense. We're actually, like, the studio is the training ground for self-discovery. And then as I listen back to myself do that scream 60 times bad, make these little micro adjustments with how things feel, and then finally get a take that feels good, then as you've developed this, the muscle memory kicks in, and then I can do that live, no problem. But I'm curious to know if that's how you have felt in the studio with your vocal development.
I think the studio has been one of my greatest teachers, and finding, and not, I think when I went into that first record, I went into it with the mentality of, like, I know what I'm going to sing, I know how I'm going to do it, and here it is. Mm-hmm. But by the time the second record happened, I kind of started finding other parts of my voice that worked and parts that made it feel better. Yeah. And I think that's when I started sighing out of notes. Uh-huh. And I started, I remember my wife actually saying something, I don't think I've ever heard you do that before. I'm like, yeah, but it feels so much better. It feels good, yeah. And I think I've found a lot of different colors in my voice by experimenting in the studio and doing my own demos. I would feel free to kind of, I'm going to try it this tone, or I'm going to try it here. And it's probably, I mean, I love performing on stage.
Sure.
I can't imagine not doing it, but there's something so uniquely special about being free to create in the studio and come up with new things you've never done, or maybe even in the same registers you're used to singing, but finding a different approach that or knowing different transitions in and out of different placements where, like, ooh, maybe I'll just add grit to this word.
Yes.
Keep everything else clean, and that'll make it sound a little more interesting instead of just barking the whole chorus. And I was just doing this yesterday, and it's a really heavy song, but I felt like, oh, maybe this part of the chorus feels like it's too much at this point. And I completely cleaned it up with no vibrato, and it sounded so much cooler. And you can't figure that out when you're just thinking, this is how it is, and there's no room for, wiggle room or whatever.
Yeah.
Being in the studio, I think, gives you that freedom to access things and try things different. So what if that take sucked? So what if I got gargly on this note? Or that's why it's getting squirrely here. It's not because my voice sucks. It's not because I've blown my voice. It's because I'm doing it wrong right here.
Yep.
Let me open it up here, change the vowel, change the placement, get rid of the grit here, apply the grit here because it works great. And I think it's made me 10 times the singer by allowing myself the experimentation in the studio.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Well,
long story short.
Right. Well, and then there's the whole like freedom in how production can draw out certain things in your voice.
Oh yeah.
Do you? I'm just thinking of on Dearly Beloved, the World on Fire, where during the hook, I think it happens a couple times during the song, but the voice dries up completely, and then as the band kicks back in, there's like this isolated part where the voice is, and it's super dry, and there's a little bit of distortion on it, and then on fire, and then the delays come in, and then like there's so many things, and I don't know if you recorded it this way, but part of what I love listening to, particularly that album, is that you tend to interact. I feel like you tend to interact with the production. Your voice tends to interact with the production in a way that's like, I'm going to lean into that distorted, dry sound here and sing a certain way. And then I know that there's going to be this delay throw afterward. And so I'm going to milk that in the way that I approach my vibrato. And I don't know. Speak to how you work with production in your creative process with the studio.
I certainly think production can dictate the approach for sure, and which is why I love working with my producers, Scott Stevens, who's in a band called the X's, and Marty Fredrickson. We have gotten to this place where we all understand each other, and we kind of have a basic idea of what this track needs to be like before we get started on the vocals.
Yeah.
And then we'll change stuff here and there as we go, oh, that doesn't work. We're never locked in.
Yeah.
You're not beholden to the first listen. We'll go, oh, that's not working. We'll listen to it for weeks and go, I need to approach that different. I'm going to re-sing that part because I feel like that production was different when I recorded it, but now that we're changing it, that seems too aggressive, or that seems too weak, or it doesn't have the urgency that I was really hoping to hear there. But now that the production, I like that better, I'm going to re-sing that part. So it dictates it all the time.
Yeah.
It's never usually on the first pass. We'll do the first pass and we'll listen to it for a good solid 2 or 3 days and go, this is working, this is not. Yeah. And sometimes it's even lyrics.
Right.
This is working, this is not. Let's change it. And that's okay. I think that's the whole point of the studio. A lot of times I think people think that what we put out or what anyone puts out is exactly what they went in. That's that idea they came up with. That's genius.
Crafting.
I could never create something like that. If you heard the rudimentary basic bull crap that I've turned in, even after doing this for 15 years, and then what it turns into, you gotta, the creation process should be so experimental. There's no rules. You should never have this, and it took me a long time to get to this point where everybody's ideas are valid.
Yeah.
Like, there's no such thing as a bad idea until it sucks. You know what I mean?
Right. Until you've actually sat with it for a minute and tried it.
That you've actually gone into the vocal booth and you tried that out and you saw for yourself that didn't work. But you should always try every option, because
so do you track
you never
yourself?
know what kind of magic that's going to turn into when you hear it back.
Right.
You know?
Right. So do you track yourself? Or do you always work like in the booth with a producer, someone who can, or are you one of those guys who locks yourself in the control room and does it till you think you got it right, and then bring the producer and go, what do you think?
I actually don't track. I track myself when I'm at home for demos and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm not doing a ton of takes, and I'll go, oh, let me keep this one. That one. That's
Sure.
kind of what I was going for. That's good enough.
Yeah.
But I like, and it's all in who you work with.
Sure.
You know, I trust my guys.
Yeah.
With every ounce of myself. So there's such a mutual respect there.
Sure.
that they trust me to do what I'm gonna do, and I also trust them if they go, that part isn't working, but everything else you're doing, that's so. We've worked together for a very long time, so we've gotten to that place. But I understand the guys that track themselves. I understand the benefits in that, and the
Right.
But I also don't like getting bogged down by the minutia of running the tracks and the playlists and the comping and all this. I just want to create. I just want to be in there and feel free to go, oh, no, go back. Let me do that one more time. I know exactly what, you just go back to that spot. I know exactly how I want to hit that.
Yeah, you've got the freedom to do that.
That feels more where I'm, the most expressive.
So Chris Cornell, famously, to record Super Unknown, had Beinhorn leave during the vocal tracking, and did he really? Yeah, they wheeled the tape machine into the control room, and same thing with Down on the Upside. And he would go through and he would sing multiple takes through and do his own punching and stuff like that, because he had it in his own mind how things were supposed to sound, and it's almost like his mind was working faster than anybody else's, because he knew what he's capable of. And then after he'd gotten his takes done, then the guys would come back up and he'd sit with them and they'd comp things, and of course they were working on tape at that point. No
thanks.
Right. But I always think, well, it's so cool to hear, you've got this team of guys that they function and bring out the best in what you're doing. Not every singer finds that. And that's really awesome. It took me,
and I've worked with a lot of producers. I've worked with a lot of writers and producers that even if I didn't do records with them, we did demos, and I've gotten to experience so many different kinds of producers, and you can hear the difference in these demos versus these demos, and what they got out of me versus what they got out of me.
Right.
And it's not easy to find that person that you not only understands you as a creative and understands what you're capable of, but also understands what they can get out of you and what they can they're not just gonna, that sounded good enough, that works. Like someone who's willing to really push you and go, no man, no dude, I know you can, there's something else there that I think that you just haven't found it yet. And they tell me that all the time. dude, you just haven't found it yet. But I promise you, there's something that you're gonna do there that's gonna be awesome, and that's freeing. You know, there's freedom in hearing that and going, okay, you're right. I'm not gonna beat myself over the fact that this part isn't working yet. I just haven't found it yet, and I gotta allow myself to kind of explore and get a little nutty here.
So, yeah, exploring and getting nutty and nerdy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like trying things that it's not going to come out the right way the first 5-6 times, but as you start actualizing the idea and then feeling safe enough, not only in your own state of non-judgment, but these other people, nobody's there to judge. They're there to get the job done and to be as creative as possible. That's awesome.
You know, for instance, yesterday I did something in the studio that I've never done on any of my songs ever. I sent you a clip of it, and we won't spoil it. Yeah. But that was a joke, and we had just done a take, and they were playing it back, and I did that over it, and they happened to be recording, and Scott was like, "Dude, listen to this," and it went under the lead vocal, and we're like, we need to lean into that.
Yeah.
I need 4 more takes of that.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's when you sent me that phone clip.
Yeah. I think it's going to shock people because it's something that I've never done. And the old me would have said, oh, I can't do that. I can't do anything like that. But I was playing around. Mm-hmm. And I just, did something that I've never done before. And it just worked. Yeah. And it's that kind of goes along with your, the feeling of that freedom of just creating and not being so, limiting of yourself. Like, well, I can't do that, or no, that wouldn't sound good for me. You gotta you never know. And I would have never known if I wouldn't have been feeling in a, kind of in a playful mood in the studio when it was playing back, and it was a happy accident.
So you're working on heavier stuff in general for this new season of recordings, right?
Yeah, which has been where my heart was all along. Yeah. I look back and, bands that I was in pre-Idol, it was all heavier stuff, and I've always been into heavier music ever since I got into rock and roll. It was always the more aggressive, but at the same time, I loved songs. So, it always has to have an emotional thread to me. It always has to have, melody. It has to have something that I'm going to remember and sing to, and that hopefully others will as well. And my love for pop melodies never changed. My love for singing, so there's that combination of, you got the aggression, but you also have the emotion and the beautiful melodies on top of that. And if there's a way to make that work within what we already do. Yeah. And I think when we did Separate Ways, that was a perfect example of how we can take what we do and still be heavy and get away with it. Yeah. And it was kind of a nice experiment because it was a song that people already knew, so they weren't focusing on how heavy it is. Oh, can Daughtry get away with something this heavy? It was like, oh, we know this song, so we're already on board, And it just happened to be a nice bonus that people liked it.
Well, the other thing that has been floating around is your cover of Sleep Token's Chokehold, which
I can't believe you even saw that,
man.
I that was like a last minute, anyway, I interrupted you, but
no, I was just gonna say, seeing that and seeing Separate Ways, and this is part of what I was saying at the very beginning of this call. There's just this very apparent evolution in how you create. You can see your influences infiltrating your voice, and it's just so fun to see, fun to watch.
Thank you, man.
I'm curious. You're working in the gym and experimenting with different types of screams and grit and stuff like that. I guess I have two different paths I want to go, so don't let me forget to go down both. But specifically with screaming and those sorts of detached from melody sorts of sounds. Who are your main inspirations right now? I mean, I kind of already know, and I think you've already kind of said, Vessel and Noah Sebastian, stuff like that. But
I don't feel that type of screaming, the detached from melody, works for our music.
Yeah.
But I love, I would say the closest I would think that I could probably, that seems more right for what we do, would be Johnny Hawkins from Nothing More. Because he's got that aggressive bite, but it's within the melody, and it's so powerful.
That segment on This Is the Time, right? That where he goes lower and then gets that sort of thing happening in the midst of the note is just Johnny Hawkins is. That
Spirits album is a masterpiece.
It is. Yeah. So okay. So Johnny Hawkins, and then of course, you obviously been listening to and singing Vessel.
And love Bad Omens.
Yeah.
Love Noah
He's
Sebastian.
so good.
I don't even try to mimic him. His voice is so out of my range. His natural tone is just already above what I do. I just appreciate it from afar.
He's one of those guys.
I love it.
That's awesome. Well, that sort of brings me to that second path. Got a lot of questions, when I posted the first thing, first announcement that we were going to be talking today. I got a lot of questions about your range. How have you continued to expand? Is mixed voice a thing for you? Do you think in those terms? How did you discover how to sing higher? You alluded to using your head voice, which and understanding all that has to offer and how you can blend that. You alluded to that earlier, but I'd love you to talk a little bit more about your journey in exploring and expanding your range.
I think this goes all the way back to when I was listening to, maybe even earlier, but trying to sing, those high soulful records like Boys to Men as a kid, going from the, and learning how to kind of push up into that note where it doesn't feel like I'm reaching.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was doing at the time, and it just compressing down and going up. And then when I started applying that with I felt like I already had somewhat of a decent range when I started listening to bands like Live and Soundgarden, where I was, and then it was like, okay, how do I get the grit too? How do I, find that and combine the two? And are they mutually exclusive, know? And so I think it was just, I don't think there was any one thing. I think it was just a combination of trying different clothes on, you know what I mean? Trying on different shirts and seeing which one fits, and and seeing which voices felt accessible to mine, because we all love certain vocalists, but we can also hear that, okay, tonally that doesn't sound like anything that I would even do anyway, so why am I gonna try to mimic that?
Right.
But what can I do that accomplishes the same thing?
Yes. You're putting it in your own voice. You're drawing inspiration from someone else and then you're going, well, what would it sound like if I experimented with it in my own set of strengths and limitations and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
exactly. So I think it's just that trying on and see what works. Like, oh, I love singing to Tool. Oh, I feel like I can nail all that. I love singing to Soundgarden, but when I get to this part, woo, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would sing down records. I mean, I would be in my bedroom. I'm sure my parents were like, "Oh my God, I hope he figures this out at some point." Because we lived in a double-wide trailer, so the walls were thin and they could hear everything. And I had the stereo cranking, and I was going down Alice in Chains, Dirt, Secret Samadhi, like all these records, and I had to have it loud enough so I felt free to just go for it. And there were moments that felt like, ooh, I connect with that. That works. And then there were times where I'm like, that doesn't necessarily feel like something I can't do, but it doesn't feel right for my voice.
So if I could package what you just said, I feel like it goes back to your playful, non-judgmental experimentation, right?
There you go.
It's the same as...
That's much better than what I just said.
Well, you sort of... It's like the cartoon characters that you did when you were littler, taking that same, like, well, I can't do it that way, but if I do this, and then you're listening to how it feels, listening to how it sounds, putting it in your own set of experiences, and that is how you stumbled upon your range. Had you set out to say, well, I can only hit an A4, but my goal before the end of is to hit the C5. Had you been going that direction, you would have gotten into the same position you found yourself in Idol, which is you're striving, you're trying to achieve, you're trying to perfect something that you haven't experienced yet. And so by you drawing from all these different places and just going, whatever, you were able to then surprise yourself. Like, oh yeah, I guess I did do that. And that is, it is such a cool example. And when we have someone like you who's done so many albums, and there's things, little recordings of you singing Chokehold over here, and your original Idol audition. We see this journey, and we look at it through the lens of someone who is always learning, adjusting, experiencing, playing. There's nothing more inspirational. There's nothing more because you have achieved the things you've wanted to achieve, yet you're not done. But it didn't come by trying to achieve. It didn't come by trying to be good. It came by saying yes, and it came by going, what's the worst that could happen here? What do I have to lose? Oh, I'll just make this sound or do this, or I'll just go to that place in Denver and try that. And it's fearless experimentation based on wanting to have more experiences, wanting to do that, not wanting to be a certain thing, but wanting to do that sort of thing. And that's it. Awesome. So cool.
Really, honestly, most of the other than just basic singing, most of everything that I ever stumbled or have learned, I stumbled upon through, just trying to create sounds and figuring it out. And now it's become, it's muscle memory. I turn it on and off, but whether it be grit or clean or whatever.
Yeah. So do you have any, top 3 Soundgarden songs?
Now you said you had 2 paths. Did you go down both?
One was the distortion and the grit,
cool,
and then the other one was the range.
Okay, now what was your question again?
Top 3 Soundgarden songs. Don't think too hard.
Okay, top 3. Woo, man, I love Mailman. There's something about that song gets me every time, man. Ooh, when he gets on that, that distorted 57 or whatever.
Saturation, You hear his breaths in there too, right? Like the breath is every bit like the way he times those breaths and like leans into the mic while he's inhaling, and then just that analog saturation on his voice is it's just, so good.
Gosh, this is really hard. Top 3.
You could say more just because I like talking about it.
I love them just for different reasons.
Yeah.
I love Limo Wreck.
Uh-huh.
I love New Damage. Holy Water. Man.
Yeah.
There's so many great songs that I have such a hard time picking 3.
Yeah, I did that on purpose because I wanted you to struggle through it.
Yeah, I love. Like Office Space. I celebrate his entire catalog.
Yeah. Well, he was Soundgarden was the first band that I realized, because I think I got a dubbed tape of Super Unknown when I was 14 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I wore the tape out, and then of course bought a bunch of CDs. And I listened to Super Unknown first. That was my first exposure. And actually, before I had the tape, I heard Black Hole Sun on the radio, and thought, oh, this is a cool album or a cool song. And then I went over to a friend's house, and he had the record, which I dubbed the tape, and he was playing stuff. I was like, wait, this isn't the same. It's Black Hole Sun. And
I had the same experience. That was the song that I heard about, and I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
Then I heard the record, and I was like,
right. Well, I heard Let Me Drown, right? Because he just put it in at the beginning, and I'm like, this and Black Hole. Oh. And then that one scream, I see you, and then it like explodes, and then there's that scream that when I first heard it, I was like, is that Kim? Is that Chris?
Goes through the stratosphere.
But that whole album, the way it flows, and song to song, and anyway, and then I went backward to Bad Motorfinger, right? And then went,
same.
Who is this guy? And then I remember there was this CD place in my town where this was, of course, before streaming or all that stuff, and you were able to go up and you were able to hand this guy at the counter a CD and be like, I want to hear this CD so I can figure out if I want to buy it or not. And so I already had Super Unknown and Bad Motorfinger, and I was going through the catalog. I was like, Louder Than Love, Screaming Life, what are the? So I went through and I'm listening to them, and I went, huh. And with my teenage brain, I wasn't quite able to wrap my head around the genius of where he got to with Super Unknown and Bad Motorfinger by listening to those. But later, those were going to be the things that helped me figure out how to do what he does.
Yeah. It's funny, going back to my algebra teacher, he knew how obsessed I was with Soundgarden, so he came to school one day and goes, why don't you listen to these? And he brought me Omega OK and Loud Love.
Yeah.
And because he was way cooler than anybody else.
Yeah.
He was like, I saw live. They came to play at my college, He was from Pennsylvania, So he was like into all the stuff that I was into, but he was that guy that'd be like, you think that's cool because it's on the radio. You should try this. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I found out about Bad Motorfinger, Ultra Mega OK, and Louder Than Love. And I was the same way. I was like, who is this guy? And how does he sound like this?
Yeah. And then when
are we the same age?
I'm 41 right now.
Okay, I'm 43. So we're around the same age.
Right around there. Yeah.
That's crazy. We kind of have the same trajectory with our Soundgarden.
Yeah. Well, and then Down on the Upside came out, and I remember I was like,
and then they broke up.
I know, it's horrible. That was terrible. But then they got back together. I actually got to see them at Red Rocks in 2011, and it was just, I'd never seen, because they broke up before I got a chance to see them the first time around.
Yeah.
And I saw Audio Slave a couple times, but yeah, that was an incredible experience. But when Down on the Upside came out, it was another one of those things where, like, I was so glued to Super Unknown and Backward, And then initially down in the upside felt like this huge step backward to me. Like, oh, yeah, they're burning out. Oh, his voice is... And as I listened to it more and more, and then as I started to sing some of the stuff, like, the hardest stuff to sing in the Chris Cornell catalog.
Give it everything I need.
Yes, or Burden in My Hand is. I think it's the hardest Soundgarden song to sing. I mean, because of the way he's in that middle of his, he's in that middle mix. You know, Jesus Christ Pose. I can sing that song all day long.
Yeah,
because of the way it's sort of like floats down that melody line.
Yeah.
But when you're in that middle with that grit that he had in Burden in My Hand or Overfloater, I enjoy your later stuff way more because I hear that evolution, I hear that context, much the same way that
I do too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, I just feel like I'm in a place now where I know what I want us to do, and I know I kind of, you know, got away from when I finished my record contract, and you know I have affinity for all of those records. Don't get me wrong. You know, production aside, there are songs that are on all 5 of those previous albums that I love. You know, some of it I could take it or leave it, but I got to a place where I was thinking, if I'm in the crowd right now and I'm watching me, is this what I want to be doing?
Yeah.
Is this the feeling that I got when I saw Live in 97? And if it's not, then I'm doing it wrong.
Oh, cool.
And I'm not doing the music I want to be doing. Yeah. So I started going back and I started listening to those records that inspired me again. I went back and listened to Dirt, you know, Anima,
yep.
You know, Facelift, Secret Samadhi, Super Unknown, Bad Motive. I went down the rabbit hole of everything that fired me up as a kid. Mm-hmm. And that was the impetus of Dearly Beloved.
Yeah. I mean, you hear it. You hear it in the way that you. I feel like your tone placement experiment is more dynamic. I felt like on the earlier albums you were locked into a bit more of a like I gotta sound big and old and
that's
now
exactly what I was singing. I was blown away. What right. You know? There was no head placement.
Right.
I sing that so airy now live that I'm like, I wish I could go back and re-record those songs because I had no effing clue what I was doing when I did that first record. And you're right, it was me just, I gotta sound big and rock. Yeah. You know?
And now the irony is you sound bigger and rockier now than you ever have because you're going at it from a more, it's almost like you've returned to the roots of playing with cartoon characters, playing with placements and experimenting. Yeah. And that comes out so much in Dearly Beloved. I can't wait to hear what comes out in the later stuff too. But
oh man, I'm so excited for what we're creating right now, man. I wish I could share it with you. But
I'll hear it eventually.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey and I hope people take something from this that it doesn't stop.
Yeah, right.
You know, we should always be trying to evolve as human beings, as singers, as artists. We can't hang our, you know, hats on the fact that we've already done our best work.
Yeah.
And I had that mentality for a while. Record sales aren't like they used to be. I guess we've done everything we're gonna do. But and then you go, that's not why I got into this.
Right.
That's not what it's about. I want to feel 100% happy with what I'm producing, what I'm creating, what I'm, sharing, achieving vocally and hopefully, learning something new along the way and getting excited about that and wanting to add that into the mix and just constantly challenging myself and growing, and it's exciting. I'm in a very exciting place in my career right now.
Yeah, well, you are. You don't need to do anything. You are free to do what you want to do, explore how you want to explore, share how you want to share. I love what you said about you being in the mindset of like, am I sharing with people what I would have wanted when I was at that live show in 1997, right? Like, are you creating these moments for people that make people go, oh, I want a piece of that. I want to consume a piece of that, but like, this is inspiring me to break out of my own shell. This is inspiring me to do things that, and I think that's when I saw your cover of Chokehold, and that was this like, man, he is still, and not still is even the wrong word. Like, more than ever, you're reaching into these new places and giving people inspiration.
Thank you, man.
And it's just
that was a bit of a risky move. We played Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah.
And I had been listening to that record ad nauseum, and I was messing around with it backstage, just playing it, and I was like, I wanted to add a song to the acoustic bit. I always do Waiting for Superman acoustic. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, we're in London. Sleep Token's from London. Our crowd's probably going to be completely clueless, but I don't care. This is going to be a fun moment for me. I even said it to the crowd. I was like, this is going to be a very self-indulgent moment. Uh-huh. This is for me right now. And I'm so glad I played it. It's the only time I've ever played it. And it felt so good hearing that swimming in the room, and it's such a beautiful song anyway.
Yeah.
I love those melodies so much. I love Vessel's voice. I love the soulful use of his glides in and out of falsetto, and his runs, and then that big chesty belt. It gets me every time.
Yeah.
So I love doing covers that maybe our crowd doesn't know. Like I've gone out and done Deftones before.
Oh, acoustic,
nice. And Changing the House of Flies. And I just want to do songs that make me feel something, and in return, hopefully makes them feel something. Whether it's a known hit or not, to me, it's all about feeling. It's all about emotional connection.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to achieve in our shows.
Well, I want to talk about Separate Ways, because this song is definitely a departure from stuff that you've done, and it kind of goes along that heavier thing, that you were alluding to earlier. And of course, getting to sing with Lzzy Hale. Jeez.
She's a monster.
Talk about the process of like choosing the song and working with her, and what I love about that video, by the way, is it's a mocked live performance, but in the live performance aspect, and you've done other videos sort of like this too, but in the mock live performance, and then you go to B-roll of the studio, the creation process in the studio. Yeah. I just love stuff like that, because it's like you're almost making a mockery of it. This is not a live performance. This is just us coming up here, and you even have like the AKG mics in there.
It was literally like we didn't know we were. We just showed up to the studio that day. We knew we were tracking the song, but we also knew we had a camera girl coming in to just get some B-roll.
Yeah,
and just to get some footage so that we could have some bits to promote the song. And neither one of us are like dressed for a music video. And we get the footage back, and I was like, I guess we got a video here, It looks cool. The lighting's cool, and then they chopped up some footage, and it worked. So that was kind of a kind of impromptu, unexpected video, really.
Oh, interesting.
It just so happened to work out. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm literally looking at the lyric sheet in front of the mic.
I wondered, and the eye contact that you guys had was as if you weren't really performing for a video, right? Like it was this sense of like, are we going here? Let's.
First of all, I am very uncomfortable. I tend to close my eyes a lot when I'm performing anyway. Mm-hmm. It's just a natural reaction. It's involuntary. So when I look over and she's like totally like making eye contact with me, I'm like, well, I guess we're doing this.
Yeah,
I gotta dig in. Oh boy, this is uncomfortable. So I'm glad it came off okay, but I was definitely like, I'm challenging myself here a little bit. But
that's so crazy. That's so crazy that it was like an accidental video. But now hearing you say that, I have to go back and watch it again. But it kind of makes sense. There was this natural, impromptu sort of thing about, like, vibe about it that worked really well.
Yeah. Me and the guys were kind of in the studio. I mean, on the road last year, and we were talking about like wanting to put out like a cover that we could make ours. Kind of like how Disturbed came out with The Sound of Silence, and it became like their song, right?
Yeah.
So we wanted to do something that we felt like could be like our cover, know. And we were kicking around some ideas from the 80s. We wanted something in the 80s. We wanted something with, some synths, because I love the sound of synths, and something hooky and something that we can make heavy. And at first we were talking about doing Final Countdown.
Oh, right. Yeah.
and the more I thought about it, I was like, man, I just picture us in a karate montage or something.
Sure.
I don't feel like there'd be an emotional connection there. And me and my wife were watching Stranger Things the last season. And it was like right at the finale, and it's this big epic scene about to happen. And then I hear, and I was like, ooh, I think this is the one.
Oh, cool.
And his vocal was all chopped out and soloed out and kind of panned over here.
Yeah.
And it just sounded so eerie and cool. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot how incredible this song is.
Yeah.
And so I called my producer up. I was like, dude, we got to get on this song, like, before anyone else like jumps on board, because this show is blowing up, and I feel like this could be the cover. And we kind of kicked it around back and forth, and he was like, well, what do you think about doing it as a duet? I was like, I didn't really think about that. Lyrically, it kind of lends itself to Lzzy. Mm-hmm. Let's get Lzzy, because we had been talking about doing something for a long time, and ever since like 2013 when we toured together, and we've been in touch, back and forth over the past couple of years, and like during COVID and everything. And she lives in Nashville. We both live in Nashville, and I was like, I think I got the one for us. And she was like, hell yeah, that's my go-to karaoke song. So
nice.
She's like, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And there was just something, I've always been a fan of her voice. I love her voice. I had no idea how much we were going to gel.
Yeah.
Tonally. I've sang with a lot of singers and a lot of powerhouse singers, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, Sometimes it feels very separated, or one's fighting for position. This locked so perfect. We were both looking at each other going, damn, we sound good together.
Yeah.
This just works.
Well, let me say,
it just felt like magic.
You did not go your separate ways during the recording. No, the blend of it, the heat that you guys, and I said some of this during the video, but the heat that you guys both put on your voices in certain places, right? That whole decision-making process of like, I'm going to use grit here, but not here. I'm going to be clean here and here. And then also in the ways that you guys, you're pronouncing the vowels, the modifications, and all, they're just so on the whole time. And you diverge where it where you want there to be some divergence, and then you come back together in the climax, right, where I had pointed out that like you gave her that note. And then you said, well, actually, but there's this wonderful...
touch on it.
Yeah, right. But there's this wonderful, like, divergence and then this coming back together. Really, one of the best duets I've heard in a long time.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. We had a lot of fun doing it. And I knew in the moment, we were like, we got something special here. I don't know what it's going to do. And we didn't actually know that it was going to take off at radio. We didn't know if we were going to have any kickback from their end, Journey or, and it just took off, and we were like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So, it was, and then we got to perform it live at Royal Albert Hall together for the first time since we recorded it.
Oh, that's so cool.
And that was such a fun experience. It feels like a dream at this point, but
think you'll do more with her, like more stuff like that.
We would love to eventually figure something out where we can go tour together.
Yeah, like a Paige Plant. You could do like a Paige Plant, not Paige Plant. Sorry, Alison Krauss and.
Yeah, that could be cool. Do a whole record.
Yeah, yeah.
Why not? That's actually an interesting thought. I mean, I would absolutely do a whole record with Lzzy Hale. I just saw her the other night. We were checking out her brother's band. He's got a side band. Her brother, the drummer for Hailstorm. She's just a phenomenal human being. You should definitely get her on your channel at some point.
I would love to. I would love to interview her just like this. That would be really fun.
Yeah, she's maybe even more nerdy, vocally speaking than I am. We get into those conversations all the time. Like, when you go up to this, like, how do you we're constantly having those like singer conversations. It's so fun.
Yeah. Well, I having followed both of you and then seeing you guys sing together, and Lzzy has that wonderful Cornell-like compression, right, when she gets up into those higher notes, and hearing that in context with what you do, you can't help but feel like the spirit of Chris Cornell sort of descend upon you as you're listening, right? Because that blend it's there. It's really cool.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, man.
Yeah. So, you guys obviously you tracked things separately,
right?
And you're in the control room, cheering her on, and she's putting her parts in, and then you go to perform it live together, and I just talk about that experience of like adapting what you guys put together in the studio and crafted there, and then performing it live from be as nerdy as you want.
Yeah, it was adrenaline. It was full adrenaline. When we walked out in the place, they didn't know she was going to be there, so it was a surprise. So, it was our, coming out for encore, and the synth started, and they know the song, and then she walks out, and they're like, ah! But it kind of felt out of body. I was, we were kind of just, and at this point, we've built this relationship, and the song is doing what it's doing, and the crowd. So I felt more comfortable locking the eyes now. So this would have probably been a better video if we shot, if we filmed it for that reason. But it was, I can't remember if there was parts that I feel like I may have bailed on because I didn't have the gas. I don't think I did the big note in the middle, Right. I think at that point I was talking to the crowd because I was so like, this is the end of our set at this point. And, but she had every bit of gas. Like, she had every note, and it was just ripping.
Nice.
And I was just having it in my ears. I was there for it. I loved it.
Oh, that's so cool.
Anything that I dropped the ball on, she was picking it up and running.
Thank you so much for joining me. And
this has been such a fun conversation, man.
It really has been. You said going into it, the nerdier the better, and I do feel like we've been able to explore lots.
I think we went in there. Hopefully we don't have a bunch of people going, "What are they talking about? We're done."
No, that's exactly what we want.
Hopefully we didn't get too nerdy.
We want more questions. That's
yes.
So, no, well,
awesome.
We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, would love to follow up, man. Absolutely.